Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, I've got a fantastic guest on my show today. His name is Ronald Kinsella. Ronald is a writer, artist, illustrator, UFO researcher who, along with his twin brother Philip Kinsella, has explored a wide range of paranormal phenomena, particularly focused on UFO, extraterrestrials, encounters, and cryptids. Can we please welcome Ron to the show? Hello there.
I heard a resounding applause for a minute there. I don't think my enemies would appreciate me saying that, I tell you. Yeah, hello, Bob. It is so great to be back on. And what a glittering intro that was. Thank you.
Yeah,
It
I,
is.
I was just looking. Last time you came on was June something 2024. It's about a year ago.
Oh, wow. Do you know, time goes so quick, doesn't it? So very, very quick. And speaking of time, that's one thing I mentioned in I had a book published not long ago called Illusions by Philip Mantle, but the books have been
Yeah,
retracted now because due to uh, circumstances which are completely understandable. He's been wonderful. Philip Mantle is a wonderful gentleman.
he
Absolutely love
is.
him.
Yes, he is.
Um, but Illusions, and I actually mentioned about time, and I did get some backlash over this because I actually announced in that time travel, to me, and my opinion only, based on logic, is impossible. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat, all right, there is something else. There is something, but it's not time. I conceive the fact that time is a human construct. It is merely a measurement, nothing more. I argued the case that what would they drive the machine through? There's no such thing as time. You see, because we've been indoctrinated with this concept of time, we believe it to be reality. I mean, H.G. Wells had a wonderful fantasy of actually driving something through the fabrics of time itself. But I don't believe that can be made possible. But there is something else. They have got it wrong, I believe. It can be done, but not using time. There is something else. I'm going to leave that little gem with you because that's in my book, Illusions. And it's no good me plugging it because it's been retracted, but they will come out later on.
Yes.
I'm arranging for them to be republished. I'm in no rush really because I've had someone look at the ebook for Digital Demon. They've been very kind. They're going to publish that when it has been, shall I say, just tweaked,
Yes.
and then Illusions will come after. But certainly the time when we say about time, yes. But you see, the people will vehemently say you're wrong, you're stupid. But really, when you really think about it, and a lot of people don't, not being unkind, they jump into the bandwagon and say, this is time travel. Think about it very carefully. There is something, but it's not time. So that is one of the subjects that caused a little bit of backlash for me. I'm talking about this entire topic, the entire UFO cryptid
Yes.
research that we've done. It didn't come lightly because, to begin with, I mean, we were very creative. Philip and I were extremely creative, and that goes against you. As you know, it will go against you because imagination. You fabricated it. I'll use the word fabricated, which someone recently used. We won't go into detail about that, but it means lie or invent, depending on what angle it takes. But to the point where we were very artistic and creative, we didn't know which angle it would take because when we were very young, we went to high school and we had a fascinating teacher there. Now, this is an example of our creativity. Now, this teacher fascinated us beyond all measure. She was amazing. I don't know what it was about her. Philip and I were mesmerized by her. I can give her name because she was a lovely lady, and I've written about her in my book. I've given
Mhm.
her credit, Miss Horton. Now, she to us, or she did look like now the Judge Judy. So you get a kind of feel for what
Oh,
she
yeah.
looked like, and it was not just her mannerisms, her voice, the way she walked, the way she was. It was everything about her. So what Philip and I did, unbeknowingly, we were kickstarting this creativity we would go home, and there was a record player our grandfather gave us, our wonderful grandfather Kinsella, beautiful soul, lovely man, very generous grandfather, Grandpa Kinsella. He gave us, because we didn't have CDs then, and we didn't have HDMI and all that.
Yeah.
We just had a record player. It was a chest, so you opened up the lid and you had a record deck, and you had the spaces on the sides to store your records, LPs, vinyl, whatever they want to call them, and it had a radio on it as well. So we had this record called Go With the Ventures, and I absolutely, this is what Grandpa gave us. He gave us one of his records, was Go With the Ventures, and you can actually hear it on YouTube. It's called Escape, and quite befitting this track, because we would act out Miss Horton in our room. We would do these chapter plays in front of each other. So I'd do one and Philip would do one, and we had this to the tune of Escape, and this is documented in the Digital Demon. And we had this plastic gun. I think it was a ricochet game, rather like you knock the cans down with it. It was a modern looking thing, but we pretended to be a ray gun. So we armed Miss Horton with this ray gun, and we put her in a space adventure where she was, pursuing the unruly pupils, and to the tune of Escape. And we got her right down to a T, even her walk. Now, when we went back to school, unwittingly, she was feeding us with fresh material on a daily basis. This woman, who was absolutely beautiful. She was also very kind. She wouldn't have nonsense, but she was kind. But Judge Judy in space, we'll call it that. So this is what gave us this creative spark. It wasn't to do with writing then. It was more Miss Horton, and then the computers came out as well. So it took on a barrage of these things, but these things ignited our creativity. But what's cruel about it, what's very nasty, is the fact that we see these strange things occur, these UFOs. So, of course, what a wonderful epitaph that is, to not only be creative, but to see these damn flying saucers, tongue-in-cheek, put. But this is what, went against us when we saw these things. And of course, even then as children, yes, Philip and I spoke about them, what we saw, but we didn't to others. It's not the sort of thing you do. Now, ironically, Miss Horton, she was very instrumental with this, because she knew I think he was a geography teacher, Mr. Jones. They were both lovely souls. Mr. Jones had a tweed suit and he smoked a pipe, and he was into these UFOs. I don't know how she got to know about it from me and Philip, about our interest. Perhaps we said something, but one summer before we were breaking up for the holidays, Miss Horton introduced us personally to Mr. Charles, and he told us that he was going to lend us a bunch of magazines about the unknown. I can't remember what they were called at the time. In the 80s, it was a popular magazine. It escapes me at the moment. I can't think of it. But Mr. Charles lent us all these magazines. So when we went to Grandma and Granddad's, our other grandparents, who were wonderful as well, we read all the accounts in there. We read Mr. Charles's. We borrowed them, and Miss Horton said, "You make sure you bring them back neat and tidy." She was so lovely, and we did. So it's strange, isn't it, how these people in the past instigate your interest, or they help. They put you up a step, and they were both absolutely wonderful. This fascination with Miss Horton never left, because she eventually sadly went. I don't know where she retired back to Australia. I think is where she came from. But I do miss her, and she was just so wonderful. And Mr. Charles as well. He was a lovely chap, and obviously he'd seen them. He's a middle-aged man at the time. We were only kids, really. He's a middle-aged man. He's seen them, and what a gentleman, both of them, and a lady to spur us on, with this interest, and not make fun of it. Because it was even then taboo, wasn't it? It was taboo.
Because most teachers wouldn't have bothered.
No. It's very weird, but the creativity encompassed, the knowledge we gained from these two wonderful souls. That it was a matter that was taken seriously. I mean, of course, then you didn't have the internet. There was no such thing. We wouldn't know what that was.
No,
we're talking about 1980, for goodness sake, or 1981. When we adopted an interest in it. But when we saw these things, I think that's when we must have mentioned to Miss Horton, and then she got us in touch with Mr. Charles. It's incredible, isn't it, when you think about it? Very strange, wonderful, and of course, creativity goes against you. But I think now it really doesn't, because I think there's been enough sightings, genuine and the legitimate, from what we can determine, reports of encounters. We're now seeing it a bit more open. And ironically, with the help of the internet itself, it brings people much closer together. It
Of
also creates,
course.
yes, it also creates many enemies as well.
Oh
we,
my
we won't
God.
we won't go down that road.
No, we won't go down that way. Definitely. But that did that. I know you saw them sightings when you were children, basically. Did that influence you to look more into UFOs and find out more information then?
Not at the time. The incident in 1982 with our grandmother, when we saw that sphere,
Yeah.
um, in her garden, in the back garden, something from Doctor Who. I won't relay it now. I think people know enough to know the encounter. That was kept quiet. All of it was, really, until I was in my 40s, or mid to late 40s, because I had seen them again. I'd seen one of these triangular ships, and this, I think it was in 2010, that I saw this triangular ship, this black triangular ship above my head, massive. And what was strange, I had heard of them because I used to watch Unsolved Mysteries with the wonderful Robert Stack.
Oh
These were
yeah.
on Sky. Yeah, I loved Robert Stack. He's like your granddad, isn't he?
Yeah.
Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries. What happened? He was like, I loved him, absolutely loved him. He was perfect host, I think, for that. And the gentlemen afterwards, they are fabulous. But Robert Stack, he hosted Unsolved Mysteries, and I had heard of the Belgium flap, the UFO, which the triangular ships that was reported heavily in Belgium at a particular time, especially in the 90s, witnessed by police officers as well. So I was aware of them, but these described in that were big, but they were also angular. They were sharp at the edges. Now, what is strange, in 2010, when I looked at this thing, it was like a slab of metal in the sky. It was very thick set. You got these in Belgium, and this one was, I call it the fat triangle, without being offensive. All right.
No, I know what you mean.
And the corners were not angular, they were rounded, they were very smooth, and I had a good look at this. This is in daylight. This was in daylight. It was in August
Right. Right.
2010. It was in pure daylight. Yep, I got a good look at it, but it looked shiny. I had a damn good look at it. The corners were rounded. I couldn't see the front, I couldn't see the top. What I did see was the belly and the rear, and there was no girders, anything under it. There was no instrumentation. There were no lights. It had not one light on it, but it looked like it had been dropped in a vat and molded. It was just a lump of metal, and
Right.
it was huge, and it just carried on gracefully at the speed of a plane, and then just disappeared. Now, at that time, I think we did have mobile phones, but I did have no gumption to go in and photograph it, because I gather, like we've seen, as you see a UFO, you're like a hair in the path of an oncoming vehicle. You're just paralyzed by the headlights. You're just absolutely gobsmacked. But what was interesting, and I did notice this about this particular episode, I remembered it well. The others, when we saw the sphere with grandma, they said, did the insect stop? I don't know. I can't remember that at all. We wouldn't have known that at all. I knew nothing of it. I couldn't tell you. But what is clear about the triangular ship, it's not to do with insects at all. We have a lot of birds where we are, loads of birds everywhere. They're always flittering around. There's one thing I noticed when this thing arrived and it just moved across the tree and I could see it. There were no birds. There was not one bird. Not one bird. I don't know if that's any relevance. I've mentioned this before.
Mm.
I believe it was published in a book by another author who wrote a wonderful, fantastic book based on the triangular ships, the sightings. He'd seen them himself. But I mentioned that in there. But you see, again, the triangular ships spurred me. That was the one, because I was standing there completely gobsmacked. And I kept thinking to myself, these are real. I mean, if it was military, let's consider this. I'm not denouncing that at all. And if it is, they're not saying. They're not saying, but why? I mean, the military are very, very smart, very smart. Okay. So I find it very hard to believe that they would flaunt exotic hardware within civilian airspace. They wouldn't do it. I've
No.
heard of the pitiful, I've heard of the pitiful, excuses from people saying, oh, they're testing to see how you would react. They wouldn't even bother. What's the point? With things like that, I mean, it looked like a huge lump of iron. So it could hang as light as a feather. This is what staggered me. If they had technology like that, they could reach Mars within a few days.
Oh, of course they could. Yeah.
Yeah. Speed and size would be of no restriction. In order to travel to a planet, you would need plenty of space. You need leg room. Really, you do. If you can afford it, or you can build it, you'll have leg room. Enough water, food, supplies. This thing was the size of a battleship. So I don't believe it was the military. And of course, as we slip back into the past, we find that these triangular ships have been reported even as far back as the 60s. So are you telling me that military had technology then in the 60s? Like that? I mean, today perhaps it's feasible that they might be able to develop something like it, but I wouldn't imagine it would be silent. No, no. Actually, thinking about it, no, no, I don't think so. I'm not denouncing them. They probably achieved some
No.
incredible things, but they wouldn't flaunt it over civilian airspace, and also, a thing like that, what's the point? They would use it for other, means of testing or missions rather than just showing it off. What, just to gauge the reaction of a few people who might have seen it? No, there's something very strange going on there. So this triangular ship was the very thing that pushed me into writing my first book based on it, the paranormal. It was called Twin Souls, and it was published by a publishing company called Cap or Bam. It didn't do too well. It wasn't really heavily promoted, but it was published, and it came out in 2012. That's what really pushed me into really developing a kind of strength to push on with it and to research it, because I had seen them myself. Philip has seen them. Um, the trouble is with this subject, you can bang your head against the wall because you just read encounter after encounter after encounter, and they vary so enormously that you're just left scratching your head. What have we got? A barrage of visitors from outer space, like many different models of ships, many different aliens reported. I believe the Greys are actually the ones in vogue at the moment, although it was the Nordics in the 50s, wasn't it?
Oh,
And
yeah.
this is what spearheaded with I think, I don't know if it was Digital Demon or Illusions. I can't remember. Is people say, well, how can you not remember? Well, we're human. I've written quite a number of books. I can't remember every piece I put in there. I don't read them again when they're published for fear of feeling I could have done better. So I document it as best I can, and that's it. It's
Yeah.
down to the public. It's down to them. Rightly so. They can judge for themselves. But
Of course they can.
I kept wondering whether in some way we were being tricked by something else. I called it the atomic magician. That's a very basic, weak analogy to give it in human terms, but something that can conjure things and make them look real, and for the reason of what I actually put in there, it,
Right.
it would encompass them, the Greys. I'm not saying the Greys are an illusion. Perhaps something is copying them. We have a number of things here, I believe. That's why we have so many different encounters. Bigfoot, the werewolves or dogmen as they prefer, because before researching this subject, it was very interesting because I found a barrage of different kind of aliens. You even had ones that looked like Mr. Spock from Star Trek.
Oh,
Okay, yeah. Jellymen, as Philip Mantle has mentioned, jellymen, fairies, goblins, dwarves. And I kept thinking to myself, is this something more than for what we've been led to believe? Could this be possibly something that borders on the line of psychology rather than actual hardware and physical matter? Because they did not, the aliens in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they didn't seem to kind of have any solid basis for you. What I mean by that is they weren't set. They were all different. Jellymen, Mr. Spock, Nordics, but it wasn't Close Encounters of the Third Kind that did this, because Steven Spielberg is a genius and I loved his film. I've seen it. It's a beautiful film, beautiful. He's a master. He really is a master, just like George Lucas. But I believe it was Whitley Strieber's Communion book, because I remembered the time when that was published, the picture of Ishtar on the cover. I believe he calls that Ishtar. The Ishtar is actual god, but it is a grey. And the picture invoked such a reaction that shortly afterwards it became everyone was talking about the Greys and Silhouette set in stone. The Greys are in vogue. I'm not denouncing Betty and Barney Hill, the Kathleen Marden case. I'm just saying that there might also be a copycat here as well. You see what I mean? Something that is utilizing this kind of thing to gauge reaction.
Yeah.
And what it wants, which would normally be, I think, the only logical thing I can think of is fear. It would be logical to deduce that, because even mine, when I had my encounter in 1982, I referred to them as the doctors. I've never seen them again. It was only brief, and it was with them. They're doctors, because they were like men, but they were armored. They spoke British. They weren't set in stone. The Greys weren't in vogue. And of course, we look even further back at the Kelly, Kentucky, the Hopkinsville encounter with the goblins that terrorized the farm. The family. Was it Saturn's? I think the Saturn family.
Yeah.
They terrorized them. They were goblins, for God's sake. They could float, and they fired at them, and they just bounced and ricocheted back and on the roof and everything. So you see how it's strange how when we look back at all this, and it starts to slow down into a kind of pattern. And something else that's very interesting about the Greys is that me being an artist, this what I believe was what gave credence for me about what I'm suggesting, is the fact that when I used to illustrate the Greys, I mean, I was okay with them, I think. I mean, they look embryonic anyway. That might be a sign. Embryonic, fresh, new, newly developed. Perhaps it's symbolic, as well. People have missed it, or many have. And you get people say, "No, I knew that." They didn't until they hear it or read it. When I did these pictures of these Greys, people were saying that's not how they look. That's not what they look like. Okay, they're different, but they seem to change slightly from skin tone to skin texture to height to actual looks. The eyes. And I make it clear that I have not seen these at all. Philip has. I haven't seen these Greys at all. The only thing I saw was in 1982, and I referred to them. I was only a kid. The doctors. It was only once. Mercifully, not again. Never again. But to see a question, because it did happen. So with these Greys, I was illustrating them. I kept thinking, well, it's rather like this AI art we have now, regrettably.
Yes.
I'll say that because it's put a lot of us artists in real ill repute. I'll give you an example of that. I've been using ZBrush or ZBrush for 15 years. I've mastered it. It's a 3D sculpting software. I've mastered it. You don't want to see my first attempts at fashioning models. It's like plasticine. You can pinch it, squeeze it. You can manipulate it to build your models. It has taken me years to master it, and now my artwork is superb. Now, because it's computer generated, there's no cheating to be had with that. You can't cheat with it.
No,
I suppose you can't cheat with ZBrush. I suppose you can import models, but people know because the models are made. They're now jumping on the bandwagon. I had one when they've knocked back a few, glasses of wine and feeling plucky, and they're feeling that little demon rising up in them, hatred. He actually openly attacked me and said, "I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this." Is what he said. "You cheat. You're a cheat. You just input a number of instructions, and that's it." AI develops it. Oh, that did hurt. That stung.
I can imagine.
And what he did was the coward. He blocked me, so I couldn't respond to him. And I was lashing out at these people So this is the bane in our side to do with AI art. It's clever. Don't get me wrong. It's very clever, but it's
Mm.
cheating. It is cheating.
Yeah.
It's a swift, and people put their autographs on it as if, oh, look what I've done. But I think now we could generally surmise the style of AI. There is a particular style to it, a look to it. You know, we have these people, and what they're doing now, these people, what they do is they feed it through something called Bifunky. So they'll take the AI image and try and pasteurize it so it looks like it's a piece of art. But the only thing that does is degrade it slightly. It loses definition, and they love definition, so they lose it. Anyway, back onto the differences of the greys. I kept thinking, rather like AI art back then. I don't know if it can do it now because I don't use it. I've never used it. I have tried it. I've tried it once or twice. It's very
Yeah.
clever. I've tried it. I think most of us have. But it couldn't reproduce the same image twice. It could get very close, but it couldn't reproduce the same thing twice. And that got me thinking again, and I've written this in Illusions, it was published, that is it possible what we're dealing with is something that can't do the very same? It can develop them, but only to a degree. It cannot keep consistency. It cannot maintain consistency. Just like the werewolves that differ in appearance, just like Bigfoot that generally differs in appearance. They appear, but they're slightly different. Oh, they hold the general, you know, appearance. The consensus is they are, you know, wolves or wild ape hominids, the greys, everything. But is it something else that is having a little trouble trying to maintain that consistency? You see, I think about these things, and what's really insulting is that the things I've published or come up with, you will have people stating that was my idea. That's another thing now. That was my idea. You didn't think of that. I thought of that. It's one thing I don't do is I don't lie. There
No,
are there are
that's
such there are such things as coincidences. Of course there are. You know,
bound to
but
be.
yeah, the Trojan horse hypothesis I came up with about 7 years ago. My book Digital Demon, because I mentioned this, the Trojan horse, to do with Roswell. Jack Valet published a book called Trinity, I believe. Was it Jack Valet? I think it was Trinity, which he came out with something similar. His book came out 3 months. It was published after my one. So we was thinking along similar lines. And guess what I find afterwards? They believe the Trojan horse came out in the 50s, and they've even got the date and time. Well, you can do anything with computers now, can't you? Someone
Correct.
always, yeah, that's right. I know. I've thought some new theories up, which I'm not going to give out. I'm not to disclose them until they're
No.
published. But another one I gave was if we do have this, I'll call it the atomic magician. I've written quite, I think, it was a really good article I wrote, and it was published abroad. I never heard any reaction from it. Of course, you won't. That I think Phenomena magazine very kindly published it. Very, very wonderful. Phenomena magazine, a wonderful, wonderful. Steve Mira, absolute dream.
Yeah.
Bless
Yeah.
him, wonderful gentleman. They published it, but I had it with another magazine and they haven't even touched it. So I've given up with that, absolutely given up with it with them. But that suggested, I believe it was to do with, I was looking at these symbols to lend credence to this alleged atomic magician. It's only a hypothesis, there's no proof. What proof do we have anyway? But it was to do with something that caught my eye, a symbol. At first, I noticed it on, I believe it was the PlayStation controllers, the triangle, the square, and the circle. I mean, it has an X as well, but we'll go with that. Okay. So I was looking at the ancient symbols and I noticed the Philosopher's Stone. Okay. So not the wonderful J.K. Rowling's book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which was wonderful. I mean, I love that lady to bits. I
Yeah.
love her to bits. I think her views are correct as well. I agree with her completely. It's to do with the symbol of this apparent, alchemy, wasn't it? It's to do with creating things into gold, turning them into gold, and things like that. It was a wonderful, wonderful kind of uh, alchemy they were seeking. But the symbols, when I pulled them apart, guess what they were? A triangle, a square, and a circle.
Oh.
Okay, so they use that on the PlayStation controller, and I kept thinking, well, the UFOs usually are more than not triangle and circle and sphere, but there have been boxes, squares as well.
Yeah,
So
they are.
I kept thinking, what's this using this intelligence or this force looking and realizing that the symbolisms could be put to good use in the form of these kind of ships, a
Mm.
symbolic message? And is it possible that we've been unwittingly carrying it forward as symbols on these wonderful machines that are very popular to instigate this, we'll call it magic, the atomic magician, this kind of this force that can manipulate. I'm not denouncing that apparent alien encounters are real, because that aside, we have something else with us, I think, a copycat, a hijacker. It seems to, enjoy instilling fear or astonishment in many of us. And who's to say it's not even connected to us on a psychic internet? I do believe that consciousness to a degree is we are all connected. When you think of something, someone else thinks of something. I think we're all
Yeah,
joined. We're all joined to a degree, and I think it's beautiful. I think it's nice that we are, if that's the case, we are connected. Not all the time, but we connect. Somehow our thoughts reach others, and why not? I mean, if you have the military using programs such as what do they call it, where they can oh god, it's amazing. Now I thought of everything else, I kept thinking of
um,
what's it called. They can see things, they can see locations of buildings.
yeah,
Oh god, it's eluded me, my goodness, I can't believe it. Remote viewing, okay.
remote viewing.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that is potential of the mind, potential of consciousness. So why not? Something else probably has hijacked this. So what's ironic is that when they're sent on a secret mission, these people, these remote viewers, who I do believe there's a damn good track record to it, and all credit to them. They're trying these things, these alternate sciences. Who's to
Yeah.
know that something else isn't hijacking that as well, and they can see everything they're seeing? That's another thing I'd like to mention about when people are taken up by these assumed aliens, and I don't think they are. I don't think they are, because spacemen analogy would be very fashionable. It was in the 50s, and it still is now today. So, you know, a number of points I'll make on that as well, which I've done in Digital Demon. It's all in there, and Illusions, even though they're out print, you still get copies of them, where I actually look into the fact that the 50s was the craze for B movies, science fiction. There were sources. And guess what? More than not, people, if they were legitimate, I do frown upon a number of cases I've researched. I think they were elaborated. But I'm not going to mention any names. That would be very unfair. That's my own
Mm.
opinion. Okay, but for the best part, the legitimate people saw the flying saucers. They were fashioned after the kind of spaceships we have on TV. And someone say,
Oh yeah.
no, they were influenced by what they saw. No, they were not. They were created by us. The flying saucers were created. They were coined. The phrase was coined by Kenneth Arnold. Okay, I think you called them flying saucer.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Or someone, or a journalist, I don't know who it was. They
Yeah,
coined the phrase.
he
Okay,
did. He said they were
so
like saucers.
mm,
That's why he called them flying saucers, didn't it?
that's right, and so it was. So we have this change, because before that, in the 1890s, if people do their research, is they had exotic airships flying around. I documented this in Illusions. Very much beyond what we could achieve at the time. We had airships then. Oh yes, we could. They could fly airships, but these were astronomically incredible. Although they weren't geared for space travel, they certainly were different. They were documented, but you see, the flying saucer wasn't conceived then. The airships were. And so in the 50s, because the saucers wasn't conceived, but then it was by us, and so it is. And then we have the triangular ships, something a bit more military, stealth-like. You see where I'm going with this? It just
Mm.
raised eyebrows, So it raised up. And why silver? They're not now, because it realized that in the 50s that silver to us would be common sense. It's strong and it could deflect radiation. Well, if they're so advanced, they wouldn't need silver. They'd have shields, wouldn't they? They'd have
Yeah.
shields. And the thing that got me even more perplexed was the Roswell case of 1947, the famous case. Now, I believe that crashed. I believe they retrieved something unusual. I believe there were bodies. There were
Yeah.
bodies. or pilots, right? And what gave that away is that it was uh, absolutely categorically announced by the military. They announced in their own words, and you'll have people argue this, oh, it wasn't them, it was them, that they had in possession a flying disc. They had a flying disc, it basically a
Right.
saucer. These are trained men, trained men. They would know what they came upon, and that was damn unusual for them to give that to on a global journalistic principle for every country more than not to see this. It got out, and then they realized, damn, what have we done? Because evidently something on that scale never happened. You know, in a modern era where newspapers were so uh, brisk. What's the word I could use? They're on the ball. You
Oh,
know,
yeah, they
I
were
mean, they
on the
had
ball.
papers in a poll. They had papers before. We had radio and everything, so they changed it to weather balloon, and that's it went silent. So that as well, that itself comes into enormous question because they lied. Whatever they retrieved from there, they lied, and this is this is why I kept thinking, okay, so if it was, I'm not saying it was, but if it was a Trojan horse, there were other crashes throughout the world reported, but the ships differed along with the aliens, the pilots, they differed in looks, they differed. And I kept thinking, is it possible that this is a gimmick, that what we're seeing here is something creating this illusion, but dispatching something successfully, but doing so so that the pilots look different and the ships look different? They must. So as not to raise suspicion that the same species having the same problem across the world. So they feel like that they're sending these packages, whatever they were. I don't know why they were dispatched. Obviously, something. Um, if that was the case, so it's just amazing. And we look back also at the history of the sources, and yes, they were in the past. They weren't drawn, illustrated as much. I think one of them was in a biblical sense,
Hmm.
but they had crosses. So there was a great war, wasn't there? And where was it? In Germany? There was a battle.
There's one
Um,
here from Wool Rider Dog, I think. But sources are described by the governor of Massachusetts Bay, Colonel John Winthrop, in 1639. He was a Puritan, and his first documented UFO sighted in at least past 400 years.
mm,
That's
mm.
on the record.
Oh, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But it doesn't denounce exactly what I'm stating with
No,
the sources of the 50s and that, and the actual the aliens themselves. Isn't it funny to think also that in the past, and you have to be very careful because as we go further back, the aliens that are perhaps carved in stone, we can't trust them. Because I would love to believe that they are real, but we have to be very careful because there's so much disinformation and lies. We can't trust them. I recently saw one with the greys on. I didn't believe it. Didn't believe it. Didn't believe that at all. To make things fit or to denounce a theory that people will say, well, but this is exactly what happens when you're trying to form some kind of idea. You have oppression and you have people matter of factly telling you, no, this, that. That might be so. But the point is absolutely on par with what I'm stating about the UFOs, how they changed from the airships when they were created to the saucers, to the triangles. And I dare say, flying machines back then in the biblical times were non existent. So they took on, I would imagine, or they would appear as more, what's the word I could use? A religious stance. The crosses. But were they crosses? Were they saucers?
yes.
Is this how they define
Well,
them?
yeah, well,
This is exactly the problem we have trying to understand the definitions. And I respect people who try and do it, but we have no way of really ascertaining what they were trying to record, although that something very unusual did happen. The trouble with this subject, it's multifaceted. You can go on, and I've had no end of arguments with people, no end, who will say, no, you are wrong, this is the case, but they never come out with any kind of theory, with rather what I'm trying to state about the aliens themselves. And this is absolutely true. They changed. and they had no fixed kind of physical nature to them until Whitley Strieber's book came along and the grains exploded. I kept saying to Philip, I actually mentioned him, that, now that they're becoming somewhat exhausted, is it going to move on to something else? Or would that be too obvious if this was the case? And also we must take into effect on another note here, is the fact that they can't seem to maintain our airspace for long. They seem to drift in and drift out rather quickly. It's rather like the dogmen. Now, I didn't mention that. That was observed by another researcher, so I give him credit. I can't remember who it is. That is not my own discovery, but he actually stated that they seem to move in and move out very swiftly. The case of Martin Groves, he allowed me to use his case in Illusions, the encounter he had with the werewolves or the
Oh,
dogmen.
yeah.
They weren't there for long, but they were there. So, and he heard this before he had this encounter with the dogmen. We'll move on to them, shall we, for a moment?
Yeah.
He heard this metallic clang as he was walking on his own. They were turkey hunting at the land between the lakes. And he had this clang and he had to look around. Now, is that something that is cleverly using this? I mentioned this in Illusions, is using comes up a psychological impression that it's come from a trapdoor, that it's military, when in fact there will be no trapdoor there as far as we're concerned, land between the lakes. I mean, there might be, but I kept thinking, what if it was something, again, the consciousness focused on him so he can hear this thing, and then believe that it perhaps came from something underground, a facility or a military kind of establishment. I don't know, but that interested me, what he stated. Oh, he saw them. He saw them. I believe it was grinning down at him, one of them. Now, what wolf grins? I mean, it's fantastical enough having a 7 or 8 foot tall beast standing before you looking demonic, but grinning as well. I believe Paul Sinclair, the wonderful researcher, stated as well that one of them by someone was recorded to be wearing an earring.
Oh,
again, we
maybe.
have to look at the hypothesis that something else, I'm not saying all or everything, but something is copying them, or it is able to kind of mimic these things. It
Maybe
is
mimic. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Mimic.
Yeah. I'm not saying that there are genuine ones out there. There might well be. I don't know.
It could be something else mimicking a werewolf.
Just as the Greys with Kathleen Marden, who we've been in touch with. Bless her. She's a lovely lady. I think she's been on a number of our radio shows, Kath. But they were genuine, and something got hold of that, but it didn't really take effect until later on. You look back at all this, and it's very fascinating, the patterns of it, what you can try and discover with it, And also, as I stated, I wasn't going to mention it, but we go then on to, because it's so fragmented, this phenomenon is so incredibly fragmented, because you have the cattle injuries, I will call them, the cattle injuries.
Yes.
Injuries. Okay. Yeah, it amazes me how you think you've heard it all, but as I said to you earlier, we were talking in private, about this book here. I'll just show you it, called Snippy. Some of you might have heard of this. I don't know, but I didn't. So this is to do with Snippy, the horse. So you will go on and find more and more accounts. And also, this has happened with human injuries. And I think I covered this case. I think it was Illusions. I think it was White Sands Testing Grounds. I think that was it, where it was, where an unfortunate incident occurred. They saw this saucer, and it was apprehending the chap by a snake-like rope. So this is before Star Trek. This was before Star Trek, where beaming up became quite popular. Actually used, because in the 50s they landed conventionally. It was always reported, more than not. You'll have someone saying no, but more than not, it was they landed traditionally. And when Star Trek came in vogue, they were beamed up, because this case also, that's what I wondered about, using this kind of snake-like thing to haul him up and then pulled him into it. And the poor fellow was discovered a while later. I won't report what they allegedly
No.
found. But people say that's fake. But then you could say the whole thing's damn fake. You go on about each and every case. Are they tailor making it to suit their own ends? This is the trouble with this subject. People pick one and then refute the rest. That didn't happen. No, this is it. This is the trouble with having ufology. I'm open to all forms of speculation. I am.
Oh yeah.
I've stated I have no ego to bruise at all. If there was an explanation to this, to the UFOs, then I would quite happily accept it. If they were military, I would accept it. I would not denounce it. If they were from another planet, that's fair enough. But looking back at all this, these incidences which have documented myself, and many other people have, very clever people have done too. They've done the same. You see a kind of loose pattern. I always suggest or stated that it's rather like a jigsaw puzzle, and we're all guilty of this. You've got this puzzle and it's very complicated. You've got all the bits all over the board, and you're going to try and put these pieces together to form a picture. But when you try and do that, as soon as you reach a point, it's all thrown into chaos. Something else crops up that completely just throws the whole thing. I think it's very clever. And speaking about that, a lot of this occurs, I believe, in Utah, Skinwalker Ranch. Now, I know people might roll their eyes and think, oh, they've done a program on that. But yeah, it's the Navajo tribe, wasn't it? Navajo tribe who set a curse for the Skinwalker, for their enemies. So you actually wonder, and I've mentioned this also regarding the atomic magician, whether words can convey reality or whether something's listening. Whether it's strong enough spell or spelling. That wasn't me. Someone else figured that one out. Spelling, but the spells they put or the curses they instigated the Navajo tribe, whether it gave rise to a horror or a multitude of horrors. And I always stated with that, if this is happening there, which I do believe that something is going on, well, they've expressed interest in it. So, of course, it's going to have a field day. If what we're talking about is on par with this copycat or this trickster, as we mentioned. It's having a field day because they've had poltergeist activity, they've had UFOs, they've had strange creatures up in the trees, they've had even a wolf, even a giant wolf, happily coming down to greet the family, and letting them pet it before it goes for the calves. It's very bizarre, isn't it? And this is what throws it. The whole thing, you've got poltergeists, you've got the cryptids, you've got the UFOs, you've got things like Skinwalker Ranch. It just as if we are meant to just be completely confounded by it. Certainly when people are abducted by the Greys or the alleged Greys, they're told this, they're told that. They show them scenes of the destruction of the world and what could happen. And I also argued about that, the contradiction of this. It doesn't sound right to me. And again, people contest it. What I stated, saying they have shut down nuclear silos. What? Temporarily? Temporarily? Really? They're concerned about it was certainly in the 50s they were talking about their concerns for nuclear warfare. And we all are. It's a dreadful thing. And, they kept telling the abductees, they say, you need to warn the people about this. We have to stop this. We're concerned. But my God, illogical, really. And, all they need to do is flit over and nullify them, which obviously they can do. I think that was an illusion itself. It happened. They did knock out her side, but it was to add emphasis or strength to their testimony. But on a global scale, they could easily knock them all out, right? We build more, do the same. We build more, they've won. Their concerns are considered mute. They don't need to do it. They haven't. And then from then on, from the nuclear threat, we move on to the environment. Their concerns with the environment. And yet, again, excuse the French, they've done bugger all. They've done nothing. They've done absolutely nothing. We go round and round in circles. So, are these spacemen? Are they interdimensional? Are they paranormal? We don't know. I certainly don't know. I'm as wise as I was when I first started this. But it's been a journey. It really has. But I'm none the wiser because I've got no answers.
Can I just ask you about, before we go, we're all right for time anyway. It can run over anyway now. What about this UFO disclosure business? The government, the states over in the States to keep saying about disclosure, and we're going to give you some more information. And what do you think about it?
I knew when they opened this inquest, the Senate, and it is a bold thing they've done. I admire them for pushing for disclosure. They have to be honoured and admired. The gentleman behind it. We are never going to get it. They're not going to give it out. If there was a force, an alien force from another world, I don't think it matters where they come from. They're foreign. They're not from here, right? They're advanced. Evidently, they're advanced. Whatever they are, okay? If there was that knowledge at hand to them, they're not going to give that out. This is greater than the crown jewels. Anything limited is precious. And so while they're fighting and bickering over this of disclosure, they can swiftly just move the bodies, the pilots, the dead pilots, and their ships to another headquarters. They'll have the keys and they'll open the cupboard and there'll be nothing in there because they've shifted them. It makes me absolutely laugh at the fact that, they keep going on about this disclosure. They've been mocking this subject from day one and they will continue to do so. They're saying it's a bit more serious now. Yes, perhaps so, but it's still approached with tongue in cheek. It still is. And, they know the people, the aerospace billionaire companies or corporations who have these things may be on ice and hold the ships. They're not going to give it out.
Who
They're
do you
just not
think,
going to do it.
when we talk about UFO, who do you think runs the world then? Who do you
Well,
think, who's behind it all?
right. Well, recently, I think we all are intelligent enough to know that certain leaders, including the UK, are following orders from someone else. Okay? They're tunnel vision. They're not listening to the people. They're following orders. Canada, France, UK. I don't know about the others. The European Union. They're following their orders from someone. And I wonder if it's a WEF, NATO. I don't know. But so who's pulling their strings? I don't know. But certainly, to give that knowledge out of there being something else with us, something present, or albeit in the past. If they're in the past, I would imagine they're still here. Would be for them dangerous, because then we'd set our sights on something greater, and they can't have that, can they? They can't have that because they are the great. They have to be obeyed and followed. If we knew that there was a superior force above us, we should first be worried. And they don't want panic. That's one good thing, but it's control as well. That's another thing that makes me wonder about these crashes, and this is what I raised in my book. The fact, let's take if Roswell did happen, because I myself am not sure, but I'm convinced that something happened. We're entitled to our opinions. We're
Yeah,
entitled to our views, right?
I think it happened.
Wouldn't you think this is what adds emphasis to the Trojan horse hypothesis? If that is what it was, we don't know. We're not going to know. Okay. You would have thought that if they'd had an accident on numerous occasions, that they would be collected rather swiftly by their own people, their own kind, knowing that even in 1947, we had just left an enormous, terrible war. It's a Cold War as well. It's the Second World War, the Cold War, all of it. Of course, humans would weaponize anything they can get their hands on to defend. So why wasn't anything dispatched to recover these vessels and the dead pilots if they were dead? You see what I mean? That's a loose end, as there are many loose ends. Of course, it may not have happened. This might all be hogwash. I don't believe it, because there's no smoke without fire. But they're never going to disclose that we have extraterrestrials here, because they're moving now. They're shifting. If you noticed, it's military. Really? Military? So, like in the case of Snippy in the 1960s, they had ships that could beam him up and do their magic and then drop him down. I meant that respectfully.
Yeah.
The horse endured a terrible thing, but to us it would be like, my goodness. So how old is this military then? How advanced was it back then? I've already made suggestions of the airships from the 1890s. Certainly in Judge Proctor, I think it was, one exploded. That was the first account where it was actually close by, but the alleged occupant was buried and it's disappeared now. The ship destroyed Proctor's farm, or his flower bed. I think it was his flower bed. He wasn't too happy about that. But the point is, nothing came for that either. So are we under itself a great illusion? Is this all just myth and smoke and mirrors, or is there something to it? You see the complicated nature of this subject and many others. That's why I believe we're just going round and round circles. But you have people who've worked it all out. Yeah, I've already had that. I've been attacked. They know. They're the truth, you see, Bob. And I've said that
Yeah,
with tongue in cheek. They're the truth. They know everything. Well, good luck to them, because I ain't got a clue. And what I am going to keep doing is thinking and digging into certain cases that I believe are genuine. You look at these things, you've got to look at them and strip it all aside. You've got to take everything out, and then look at it from all we have is all we have is from our own point of view. I think truth comes from our own point of view, and belief, that is absolutely true of that as well, because I wouldn't have believed in these things unless I'd seen it myself. So I appreciate those who denounce it, who have not seen it. We have to understand, their own reasonings for it. And God hope they don't see these things, because it's not nice, because it pushes you into a completely different avenue with, you're not considered normal, are you? You're on another, you're Alice in Wonderland, you're down the yellow brick road, aren't you?
oh yeah, oh, and Ronnie, it will always be like that as well. You say you're from another planet. You are. You talk about this and you talk about that.
Yeah, but with all this, I wonder if it's been intentional for us to be completely confounded, that we're completely muddy so we don't look at a particular direction. I don't believe they're spacemen. I don't. I think it's something else. I think there's something with us. It's different, but it's something else. We've given it a kind of, through our own understanding of extraterrestrials, and spaceships and things like that. We've given it a kind of a model. We need models to go by. Perhaps this is so different to us in every capacity, we could never understand it. So it creates these things as illusions, we'll give that word, and dispatches them to Earth for the purpose of what? I don't know, to gauge fear, reaction, delivering something. It's good that you lay it all out, because I'm not one of these people who say they're here for whether the gender or that. I'm open to everything, even if I said it was the military. Okay, that's fair enough. They show it to us. That'd be fine. I'd be happy with that.
Ah, I know you would. I know you would. But there seems to be more people coming forward now on want to talk about things now from 30 years ago. Said I dare say no then because I knew I'd get ridiculed.
Yes, the same with Martin Groves. The werewolves. His chief told him, he was a deputy sheriff, by the way. He's a deputy sheriff, respected officer. And he saw these things, and his commander said to him, look, back then, 30 years ago, look, you can't, I believe you, but you can't talk about this. And the gentleman, actually honoured it. You have to give this to Martin, because he honoured it. And when he retired, then he could come out with it. It's like us as children. We weren't told. It's an inherent thing, because you knew, due to the press, who the authorities, I think they're a bit wiser to it than we are. They know something. So they made this complete circus out of it. It's to be mocked. It doesn't exist. That's the most dangerous thing of all. I know they exist because I've seen them with my own eyes. What they are, I don't know. I don't know. Even the doctors, were they alien? I don't think so. Have I ever called them alien? I don't know. But I don't think they're alien. I think it's something far deeper on a psychological level, something that might be tapped into us, that's reading us and listening to us on many levels. I mean, this is only one example. I must make it clear, I don't wish to step on anyone's toes. These are my own opinions, my own views. I don't wish to insult anyone else. If they wish to believe what they wish to believe, that's fine.
Everybody to their own. That's
Well,
right.
you would think so, wouldn't you? But you still get attacked. I don't attack people. I don't
No,
do that. I don't attack people. I respect their opinions. I respect that. But sometimes I will defend myself.
good for you. But when I saw that object in the sky, I never said anything to anybody. And then one of the lads had rang the paper without my knowledge and given my name. And it says, man sees flying object over Halifax, Mr. Robert Brown.
Mm.
I got some aggro from a
I
lot
bet
of
you
people.
did.
Somebody
I bet
from
you did.
London, somebody from London came to see me. I had a clue who it was. My mum said there's a man here to see you. I went, who's that then? He wants to come in and talk to you. So he brought this big folder. There was papers hanging out of it and everything. And I thought, who the hell's he? Right, he said, how big do you think it was? Was it windy? How far up in the sky?
Mm.
Well, I'm thinking, what's all this about? I
Mm.
didn't want to do anything about it. So I'd had enough by then. Anyway, I thought, well, I better do something about it. So I put everything, never heard of him again. He just vanished. Went and said goodbye, gone. And
Yeah.
I got some stick for years and years.
It's as if they know something. They know something. There's something they know. The authorities who I don't know. Is it the FBI? Is it CIA? We don't know. I don't know. But someone knows something, and they've got money and clout, and they're keeping it quiet. They this entire the engineering of humiliation and stupidity has been perfect for them, because even with mediums of the past, they have made it look rather like slapstick kind of humor, nonsense, cross my palm with silver and all that, and it took a long time for me to realize that the very people I trusted, the authorities I admired as a child and was taught to respect, lie. And that is disgusting, to know that actual adults lie. It sounds laughable, people put laughter on it, but you think about it. Perhaps this thing, if it is a case of a trickster, is having a field day, because it knows what's going on and it's playing along with it. It's having a field day, a party. I'm not saying that in a literal sense, but
No.
the reign of terror continues and it gets away with it. And the worst of it is, no one's listening. No one's listening. You can blast it out there, you can publish it, you can broadcast it, but they're not listening. Someone is coverting this, it's covering it up. It's all being covered, and they will not have disclosure. I knew that. When I saw those wonderful people in that Senate, and they are pushing, they're genuine. A lot of them are genuine.
Yeah,
They're pushing for this. They're not going to get it, because there is a power above them, and this is frightening. They are the administration, but there's someone above them that is like that wizard in The Wizard of Oz. He's behind the curtain. That's where he is. These people, they're behind a curtain. You'll never see them. What they are, I don't know. Are they people? Who knows? Demons?
Oh, are they?
Well, you could go on and on, couldn't you? But yes.
Now then, Ron, before we go, what you planning for the future then?
Well, I'm going to get the Digital Demon and Illusions back out, because they were attacked. And I've worked on a science fiction novella. It's taken me 3 years, about the future. I won't give the title out, but it's about the future. It's not very nice. I mean, I think we can ascertain that from just looking at the news at the moment, can't we? I will laugh at it, because what else can you do? You could either laugh or cry.
Yeah.
Science fiction book. And I'm also working on because I'm an artist, I'm back into the resin printing. I have a new printer, a resin printer, quite a large one, to build some of my models, certainly of the robots. I have a dog that I adore since a kid. He was like a thing I wanted, a science fiction companion, a pal. It would have been impossible back then for this kind of technology now, but I can build him as a 24-inch model to exhibit him. He was published in a book, so he's a good old boy, this dog. He's mechanical. Yeah. And also the monsters and spaceships as well. I love the spaceships, the Star Trek things and things with wings. I think they look very effective as ships with wings. They look much more meatier. I think they've got wings on them. They've got these lovely, lovely wings on them, and then and also a computer game I plan. I mean, I don't know if I've got left 25, 30 years if I'm lucky. I've got plenty of time.
You've got loads of time, mate.
Yeah.
To do some other things in life.
Yeah, moving on to 60. But you know what? I feel great. And I've had a few medical issues. I do feel good. And the mind is just buzzing with all these ideas, and the computer games, certainly, because I try to, I did work on them when I was younger. And as you know, I collect retro computers that have been refurbished. uh, you know, they've been, I've added modifications to them from wonderful people who have supplied the circuit boards and all the modern paraphernalia, you know. So I love them, and I think the reason why I love them is because it takes me back to the 80s, which were for me a wonderful time. The future's very very frightening, and I can understand why many people are worried about it. I so, you know, and I share in their sentiments of that. But we must just be strong. We must keep try and remain positive and just keep busy with our own things, you know. That's all we can do.
Exactly. And you're coming up to see us when? In October?
Yeah, coming back to see you and Paul in October. That'd be great. Going out at night, having a look round, having a sniff round, having fish and chips. Yeah,
Ah,
fish and
fish and
chips.
chips. You
Yeah,
can't beat fish and chips. The
yeah,
Yorkshire fish and chips.
yeah. It'd be great when it's coming up there.
And
You
have
know,
a get out and about down to Danes Dyke and Bempton and all over the place, basically. Ruston
it's
Monol.
it's going to be fabulous, Bob. It's going to be fabulous. You know,
Oh,
so
God. You and Philip will love it.
yeah. Okay, we're going to look forward to that immensely. It seems so long. It seems such a long way away, doesn't it? We're in June. Oh, it's not too
Oh,
far. It's only
hey,
4 months, isn't it?
where can people get your books before we go?
They can't. They've
Oh,
been removed. But I'm not here to sell them because I'm just here to have a chat. And the future, if I find uh, someone to publish the actual physical book, if not, I'll do it myself. I'm not really bothered. It's weird because I've just let go. I've just let go. You know,
yeah,
it will come. It will come when it comes. You know,
when it
that's the way
wants
it
to
is.
do.
Yeah, but with other people with their books, good luck to them. And you have to admire them because they've written them, these researchers, and they've spent their hard work and dedication into producing these wonderful books. A lot of them are wonderful, so good on them. It's just like the Snippy book. I'm going to read that. You know, good on these people. You know, they
Yes,
get. If it wasn't for them, we
brilliant.
wouldn't have this data. You know, on the internet as well. Well, the genuine side of the internet.
Correct. I like that. I like that. Get that one in.
Yeah.
Anyway, you take care and have a lovely night tomorrow night on Paul's show.
Yeah, we're playing on there. It's going to
You're
be
on there
great.
tomorrow night at 7 o'clock.
That's right. Yep, I've got the instructions. It's all written down. I never miss. There's one thing I am. I'm always on time. I tell you that now. I'm on time. I take after my grandparents and my mother. We've been raised to, you know, honor that. You know, it would be bad, really bad if you're late for anything. Don't look good, does it?
I'm like that. If I'm meeting anybody for a coffee, I'm always there 10 minutes beforehand.
I know
Never,
you are, Bob.
I
Yeah.
never arrive on time. I'm always waiting and think, where are they?
Mm. Yep, you certainly are. You know, the old school.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
certainly, sir. You certainly. I say that respectfully. All
Thank
right.
you, young sir.
Okay. Okay.
Anyway, enjoy the rest of your evening,
Thank you.
and I'll be listening tomorrow night.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you for having me on. Thank you
Oh,
to.
thank you. And my guest on Fridays is Greg Yoist. We're going to talk about Bigfoot. He's from Kentucky. He's from the old school as well. So it'd be a fantastic show with him. It's at 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific, and 7 p.m. in the UK. So thank you again. Thank you to everybody in the chat room. Good night and God bless. Catch up with you very soon, Ron.
Yep.
Bye for
Okay,
now.
Bob.
Bye.